All right, I'd like to call to order the Town of East Troy Planning Commission decision-making meeting for the month of December. Let the record show that all the commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Janner, who has been excused. Just for the audience, this is our decision-making meeting. We will not take any input from the audience. We'll have our discussion. We'll make our decision and move on. First item on the agenda is a rezone at W1602 and 1606, County Road J, parcel 181800001. So where we left this was we were concerned about the 2050 plan and how we had to make that decision. So I had a discussion with Kate from Walworth County, and basically she said we don't have to do anything different to change the 2050 plan. They do that on their end. And the language says needs to be consistent with the surrounding land use. So even though it's business projected out to 2050, a rezone would not be out of line. She also brought up they've had similar instances like this with what they call down zoning. So going from a B3 to R1 would be a less obtrusive zoning type. So she said that also kind of is in its favor. So
if it were to go the opposite direction, residential to business, and if it were inconsistent with the land use plan and it were inconsistent with the surrounding areas,
it would be a tough,
Right.
then that's an extra hurdle.
not necessarily an extra hurdle.
It's just hard
So-
to change from residential to business.
Right. So she just said the long-term plan is a guideline. It's not as steadfast. This is what it's going to be in 2050. And she already was aware of this situation and was like, yeah, the language, they changed the language. Used to be a little bit more stringent, but they recently changed it to be consistent with surrounding land use.
Okay, so I remember a memo coming out a couple of years ago. That sounds about right.
Right. And then I also said I brought up the pump station. Like, we don't want to, do something wrong, send it to you. Like, okay, you approved the rezone, but you didn't approve change to the 2050 map or anything. There isn't anything like that. So if we act on the rezone, we're good to go. There's no extra steps that we're forgetting. So
That was my question. I
Sure.
had answers in it.
Can we ask questions of the applicant?
absolutely.
Chris, I was just curious what your experience is with Lake Beulah. I just think it's interesting that you take the time to go through this rezone as opposed to purchasing an existing R1 parcel.
My wife and I have been looking at properties on the lake for about 3 years. And we were hopeful that we might be able to purchase the property that's on the end of Kings Drive, that private road there. The seller basically decided he didn't want to sell. We looked at other parcels that the lake frontage is really not good on. And so I actually know Lake Beulah pretty well because I have been involved in litigation related to the Otonka subdivision, to the Clearview subdivision, I've been out here a lot.
I see.
My wife kayaks on the lake every day. So she's got a friend that has a property out here, and I have on the old Levante properties. My cousin bought a house there. My cousin and her wife bought a house there. So we have, not only we know people in the area, but my wife was really wanting to have a place on the lake so that she could spend a lot of time kayaking. She's also an artist, and so part of the design of the house is to put a studio that will look out onto the lake for her to paint in. And so when this particular parcel came up, I first thought, well, there's no chance I'm going to be able to make this work. And then I thought, well, I might as well take a shot, because it's a nice parcel. There's a good place to put a house there. I didn't think that it was really realistic for anybody to put a business in there. And I thought that if I talked to the Lake Management District and came up with a good plan, that there might be a way to make that whole parcel work better, because there's certain aspects of, if I lived on the lake now, there's certain components of the lease and easement that's out there with the gasoline sale and transient boats and stuff like that, that I just think I wouldn't want. If I was a neighbor, I wouldn't want that.
Right.
So if it's the down zone to R1 and the Lake Management District is inclined to change the lease around so that it becomes a residential use lease instead of a commercial use lease, which I have the reason, I think they will do that. I'm pretty certain that they will do that. And so then I said, well, I'm a lawyer, I can actually communicate these things. I have to hire somebody to come in to do it. And I'm just gonna try to make the presentation and see what happens, because it makes sense. To me, the project made sense.
Yeah.
And especially with what, I'm 65, I'm probably gonna retire in 3 to 5 years, and I just wanna have a nice quiet place to live,
Yeah.
basically.
I mean, you actually just touched on the thing that concerns me is that, it's one thing for the property itself to go from business to residential and get a house that kind of downzones it, or, but then the lease for the lake frontage is kind of it's almost like the terms are commercial, So would you have an issue if we approved the rezone to R1, that it was conditioned on the lease being modified to more residential terms than?
No, I'm not gonna, I wouldn't want to make it seem like I was being presumptuous with the management district, because I don't think that would be wise.
Right.
There is an easement there that runs with the land, that runs with the parcel. And it would be my position as a lawyer, and I'm not your lawyer, but it would be my position that as soon as this got downgraded, that easement would also only be able to be used for that. The lease is what needs to be changed.
Right.
My only concern with that is, it's not really our place to tell someone to renegotiate a lease with a third party that's not us. Understand where you're coming from.
We don't, no disrespect, Chris, but we don't want Chris building a nice home there and then putting a 1,000-gallon gasoline storage tank above ground and selling fuel to boaters. That's my point. And I know that's not your intent.
Well, and the thing about it
Well,
is that there would be no,
that
there has to be. Oh, I'm sorry.
But it's allowed now. If he bought it, go ahead.
Well, and then it's R1, I don't think you do that in that zoning. It's a it might be okay per that terms of the lease, but not okay
That's
for
a good
zoning.
point,
So
yeah.
then you just, it gets invalidated. And I don't think you could condition anything on a lease, because that's more of a civil issue.
Yeah.
It's not really
But you're saying the rezone to R1 would drive the need for the lease to have to change?
you'd have to look at R1 again, but I don't recall ever seeing anything in R1 that says you can sell gasoline.
Or even run, well, you can run like home businesses or whatever. But yes, R1 would restrict him from
Yeah.
having a business.
Yep.
To sell
Got it.
gas.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, that was what I was gonna say, that the tank would have to be on the other side of the road, and that would be an R1, and at best, it would be a conditional use, which would never get approved. Not at the county, not here. And I would never, I wouldn't ask for it, and anybody who really wants to have a house there, last thing they wanna do is pump gas in front of their house.
Right.
No, the way you and Ben explained it makes sense to me.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Any other discussion then amongst commissioners? I mean, like I said last time, nobody's racing out there to build a new restaurant. Everything surrounding there is all residential, so.
Make a motion. Make a motion to approve the rezone on parcel PA 181800001 as presented.
We have a motion to approve the rezone. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any other business amongst commissioners?
There was the topic circulating around the mailing, the notices and things. I don't know if we were gonna discuss that here.
I was looking for email responses so that we could then submit them to the board. I got a couple. I did not get from everyone.
Right, I owe you one.
You might have.
I mean, unless you want to discuss it,
I didn't send an email, I'll
It's
just,
just not agenda, so I
Right.
don't know if it's proper to discuss it, but
even under other business.
possibly.
Yeah. I guess,
I mean, I think all I have to say, and I think this is appropriate under other businesses, I just don't think it's our call to make. I really do think that's really a decision that the town board has to evaluate things. And my personal opinion would be, if it's more of a cost thing, if mailing costs have gone up over the decades, maybe the cost of the application goes up to cover those costs. That's just my 2 cents.
Because you're saying you think it's important that we notify all the surrounding.
Some
Right,
people
right.
don't
I
have
just think-
access to the internet either.
There was a few years ago, there was a variance for conditional use for a property across the street from me. I think I got the flyer in the mailbox. Right, I wouldn't have come up to
wouldn't
the town
have
hall
known.
to find,
Yeah.
to look to see that a neighbor is building a garage, wants to build a garage 4
You
feet off
wouldn't
the
have
lot
gone to
line.
the Fire
It's not
department to
something-
look at you wouldn't have looked at the bulletin board at the fire department?
So that's just my 2 cents.
okay. Any other business?
Is there postcards cheaper than sending?
It would
Like
be the
sending
same
notice out?
amount of mailing.
Huh?
It would be the same amount of mailing, because the postage is just what it is. I think my question was more, are we just to get everybody's feeling and then to take it to the board and get the board's feeling?
Right.
But, I mean, do we do it for everything? Do we do it just for rezones? Do we keep it as is? Do we make some minor adjustments to try to make it a little less?
So why doesn't everybody at least respond to Jen's email? And then, again, we're not going to decide on it at our level. So let's give input and then she could share that with the town board if they want to make an action on it, so.
Yeah, I mean, is there any way to do it, electronically? Is there any way to gather up everybody's email address, or that's
Well,
easier said than done?
the drive to get people to subscribe to that website has been strong. I can't even say honestly that all the supervisors are subscribed, so that's tricky business. But the more people that are subscribed, they do get a text message or email and they can elect for either, and they get one for every agenda that comes up, which does give them the same information.
Sure.
But that's not to say that everybody's willing or has the drive to do that.
Right.
I have probably more people who are afraid of the internet that have come and I've signed them up, and then they get text messages.
Okay.
And when you just click on the link on your text message, it opens the website right to that page, and then they're not scared anymore. And so they know what it is and they can see it, but it's getting them to that point where
Right.
they are subscribed. So
Right.
it's kind of a toss up.
Okay. Any other discussion amongst commissioners or business? Any other public comment? Then I would take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Adjourn.